Let's discuss this further now. And William Booth is a lecturer in Latin American history at University College London, UCL. He joins us from Ipswich. Welcome to TRT World. Just help us understand how much of a unifying force for Latin America is Lula da Silva right now.
He's an incredibly important unifying figure because he has credibility on the left and he's also credible to the center. He's obviously not to the right, and we can see that with some of the comments that have come out around his comments regarding Venezuela, but he's very much a kind of big tent political figure. And you saw this echoed in the comments by Gabriel Boric, which is to say Lula's approach of bringing Venezuela back into the fold, bringing it into dialogue, and this is also being done by Petro in Colombia too, is the approach that they think is best for the long-term benefit of both Venezuela and the region as a whole.
And you mentioned Lula being credible there on the left and the center, but also internationally, right? This is, correct me if I'm wrong, the only Latin American leader that, you know, he's there with Xi Jinping, he's there on the international stage with clout.
Yeah, he's got a huge global reputation. Part of that is to do with the fact that his stewardship of Brazil during his first presidency was seen as unusually successful in that country, both for the country as a whole, but particularly for its less well-off citizens. But he's got big clout in the global south. He's part of this kind of multipolarity discussion that we seem to be moving towards as the end of US hegemony is talked of by many. So yeah, he's somebody who can be in dialogue with leaders of China, India, Russia, Turkey, and so on, but also talking as a representative of a regional bloc when it comes to discussions with, say, North America or Europe.
Because do you feel that the voice, the significance of Latin America just fades away with regards to other parts of the world? I'm just looking, you know, on an international perspective. I mean, we talk about it, but it doesn't dominate or make the headlines as much.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you don't have to tell me as a historian of Latin America that this region gets overlooked a lot. It's overlooked in terms of public conversation, partly because of its historical position, right? As it's neither in the old ways of talking about it, the first world or the third world. It's a region that has its own specificities, its own relationships. It doesn't have a whole lot of internal dialogue and trade and infrastructure, which is part of the thing that Lula is trying to address here, and to say that if the region acts as a unified whole, it is very powerful, particularly if you can get Argentina and Brazil to work together. Now, this summit is only really talking about South America, and the other big country in the conversation here could be Mexico. But specifically with South America, if it acts in a unified way, and there are many barriers to that, but if it does, it would be much more of a global powerhouse.
Indeed. And so just looking at some of the ideas that came out of this first summit in nearly a decade, Venezuela's Maduro being brought back into the fold, the idea of a regional currency, what else? What happens after this summit?
Well, I think a lot of the rhetoric around the regional currency, and particularly a lot of the derision that you've seen from economists in the global north, is a little bit misplaced, because they're not actually talking really about a fully unified currency that's used, you know, on the street in transactions. They're talking about a trade currency that would reduce the dependence on the dollar, and particularly the fact that the dollar is very expensive for Latin American countries at the moment. And if they can do some of their regional trade without using the dollar, then they would benefit from having weaker currencies at certain times. Another thing that Lula is trying to push is better infrastructure across the continent. You know, the Amazon rainforest and the Andes are two enormous topographical barriers to that. But if there is a way of improving the distribution of goods, of services, of people across the continent, then that's something that could also help with internal trade, with the improvement of people's lives, material lives.
Absolutely. William, fantastic to speak to you on this new regional summit that's just taking place. William Booth, lecturer in Latin American history at UCL. Thank you so much for your time and analysis.